The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States, will not be missed by most. The amount of devastation he has left this country in will not be truly known for some time. So I wanted to make a video compiling the most evil things Trump did as president so that it will be used, and it could be used as a reference in the future when people come along to whitewash the past 4 years. So without further ado, I present to you the top 10 most evil things Trump did as president of the United States. The 10th most evil thing Trump did as president was being one of the biggest presidential liars of all time. According to the New York Times, Donald Trump told more lies in his first 6 months as president than Barack Obama told during his entire 8 years in office. Donald Trump told so many lies there was enough data to build an entire database around where you can actually sift through Trump's massive and fact-checked catalog of over 25,000 lies. The database used by fact-checkers at the Washington Post begins the day after Trump was sworn into office. Barack Obama averaged 2 lies per year. 2 per year. Trump, when he came into office, was averaging 6 lies per day. It's only increased every year, according to the Washington Post. His lying more than doubled to 16 per day in 2018. It went up again to 22 per day in 2019 and has ended at 27 lies per day in 2020. This is important because the moment we normalize blatant lying and disregard for the truth, in our society, is the moment trust has been lost in governance. It means we've allowed politicians in our government to tell us whatever they want, regardless of how insulting it is to our intelligence or just how incorrect it is. Deliberately lying to the people, especially when lives are at stake, I do believe counts as an evil. So the 9th most evil thing Trump did as president was say that there were good people on both sides in Charlottesville. Most people have heard about this one.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
On August the 15th, 2017, 3 days after the white supremacist Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Donald Trump gave an outrageous press conference blaming both sides in what turned out to be a rally that would leave one woman on one side murdered. Her name was Heather Heyer. Watch this video.
You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Donald Trump will go on to blame, quote, the alt-left, I don't know what that is, and argue that everyone at the Unite the Right rally wasn't a white supremacist, even though they were all caught on camera chanting, quote, Jews will not replace us, end quotes, the night before, which that is racist and white supremacist. Why did he do this? Why did he defend them like this? Well, it's because right-wing racists are a component of Trump's base. That's why. He didn't want to throw his most vocal supporters under the bus. I also believe he believes that. He truly believes it. He believes there are good people on the side of the white supremacists. Not even a year into his presidency, it would be a sign of things to come. The 8th most evil thing Trump did as president was to tell the Proud Boys to, quote, stand back and stand by, end quote. On September the 29th, 2020, Donald Trump and Joe Biden held their first presidential debate to help the electorate to, decide who to vote for in the upcoming election. The impression from the general public after the debate was over was near universal that Trump lost because his debate performance was that bad. Also because of this video. Take a look at this.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Sure,
Are you
I'm
prepared
willing
to
do
specifically
that,
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it.
Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
Who would
right
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing. This is a left-wing problem.
Trump said, quote, stand back and stand by, but someone has to do something about Antifa and the left, end quote. Stand back and stand by, but someone has to do something about Antifa and the left. Donald Trump, since the beginning of his presidency, made it clear who he supported and who he didn't support. What's important to note is that this debate took place a month after Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old gunman armed with an AR-15, shot and killed two activists who were in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as part of the ongoing protest against state violence, and that started earlier that summer around the murder of George Floyd. I'll talk about that later in the video. But the unrest in Kenosha specifically was triggered by another shooting entirely involving a man by the name of Jacob Blake. Trump didn't use the opportunity to attack the shooter. No. He instead did what he did after Charlottesville and blamed the left when only one side was doing the killing. Okay, it's important to note that earlier that month, before the debate, Politico published an article titled DHS Draft Document, White Supremacists Are Greatest Terror Threats, where Trump's own Department of Homeland Security said that white supremacist domestic terror is a greater threat to national security, check this out, than foreign terror groups. They actually put white supremacists above foreign Islamic groups, which is they're the main ones they like to fearmonger about. Take that in for a second, and you'll notice, or you'll understand why some of the things that come out of Trump's mouth are so dangerous and, yes, evil. The seventh most evil thing Trump did as president was deteriorate our relationship with Iran and almost start a major war. So this all started back in May of 2018 when Donald Trump announced he'd be withdrawing the United States from the Iran nuclear deal established during the Obama administration. He lied, of course, and said he withdrew from the deal because it would stop Iran from building nuclear weapons, which makes no sense because that's what the deal was meant to do. But anyway, based on later quotes, we find out that Trump just didn't like the fact that we were giving them their money back, which we had frozen in foreign bank accounts due to sanctions placed on Iran due to their nuclear program. And also, of course, he just didn't like the fact that this deal was done by Obama. That probably had a lot to do with it as well. So according to the Washington Post fact checker, Trump was going around lying about Obama giving Iran $150 billion for the deal, as if the Obama administration just cut them some random check, when even the Treasury Department said that it was only $55 billion, not $150 billion. And the Central Bank of Iran said it was even lower. They said it was $32 billion. No one was running around saying $150 billion except Trump. And like I said, even if that was true, it was their money we were freezing, right? So they have a right to their money back. I mean, you would think that's the only logical conclusion, but things got much worse starting January of 2020 when Trump, without notifying Congress, ordered the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, prompting worry about war with Iran. Trump said that he believed Soleimani had plans for, quote, imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and American personnel, end quote. But even Trump's own defense secretary, Mark Esper, quote, didn't cite a specific piece of evidence, end quote. So As far as I'm concerned, this was completely baseless. But in a thread of tweets, Trump said that if Iran retaliated for the airstrike that killed Soleimani, the U.S. would target 52 sites, quote, important to Iran and Iranian culture, end quote, and, quote, hit them very fast and very hard. I remember him saying that, end quote. Targeting sites of cultural significance is in direct opposition to the 1954 Hague Convention. So that's a war crime. And even the Department of Defense's own law of war manual says not to do that. This wasn't the first time Trump publicly threatened war with Iran. And luckily, the assassination of Soleimani didn't instigate another war in the Middle East. Needless to say, Trump has destroyed our relationship with Iran, and it's unknown whether or not Biden will be able to fix what's been broken. The sixth most evil thing Trump did as president was cover up the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. On October the 2nd, 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, Saudi journalist and columnist for the Washington Post, was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Turkey by agents of the Saudi government. Even after U.S. intelligence agencies implicated the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia for ordering the assassination, Donald Trump took the side of the Saudis over his own officials and refused to cut funding to the Saudi government. He says as much even in this video. Take a look.
You know, we have Congress is very much involved. I will, in this case, make certain recommendations. We have $450 billion worth of things ordered from a very rich country, Saudi Arabia. 600,000 jobs, maybe more than that. And it would be very hurtful to this country if we said, oh, we're not going to sell it to you. So there are other things we can do, but I would certainly make that recommendation to Congress.
In a stunning admission to Bob Woodward, Trump not only doubled down, but bragged about protecting the Crown Prince by saying, quote, I saved his ass, end quote. Trump said after the U.S. outcry of Khashoggi's murder, quote, I was able to get Congress to leave them alone. I was able to stop them. And then Woodward says he'd sarcastically told members of Congress, quote, let them trade with Russia instead. Let them buy 1,000 planes from Russia instead of the United States. I don't do a Trump voice well. Fellas, you've got to be smart, end quote. In May of 2019, 6 months after Khashoggi's murder, Trump used his emergency authority to bypass the objections of Congress and sold the Saudis $8 billion in weapons arms. The heart of this story isn't just that the Washington Post, or isn't just that a Washington Post journalist was murdered. The heart of the story is that a fierce critic of the Saudi regime and Saudi intervention in Yemen was murdered because they didn't like what he was saying and they didn't like how he was exposing the agenda. And Trump didn't do a damn thing about it but brag about their money. The fifth most evil thing Trump did as president was ignore the dire needs of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria was a massive and deadly category. Well, it actually initially was a Category 5 hurricane, but it was downgraded to Category 4 by the time it hit Puerto Rico. But it devastated parts of the Caribbean, including Puerto Rico, in late September of 2017. Puerto Rico was still recovering from Hurricane Irma, which had just hit the island just 2 weeks prior, and 80,000 Puerto Ricans were still without power as Maria was approaching. In the immediate weeks after the hurricane had passed, only 50% of the locals had access to clean drinking water. And months after the hurricane, 98% were still without power. Even months after the hurricane had come and gone, hundreds of thousands of people would still be without power. However, this is what Trump did a couple weeks after the storm hit. There were a lot of controversy surrounding the response to the hurricane, such as the inaccuracy of the death count, which changed strangely from like 39, which it had been at 39 for months. Then a year later, it jumped up to 2,975, according to CBS News. However, one of the biggest scandals involved a company by the name of Tribute Contracting LLC, which was appointed by the Trump administration to provide 30 million meals to Puerto Rico. But check this out. Only 50,000 were ever delivered to the island, according to reporting from The Hill. The deliberately slow and careless response to Hurricane Maria from the Trump administration, as people were dying and starving and in desperate need for help, was a dark foreshadowing of his response to COVID-19, which I will touch on, trust me. The fourth most evil thing Trump did as president was threaten to use the military against George Floyd protesters. So I mentioned this earlier in the video. On May 25th, 2020, 4 police officers from the Minneapolis Police Department, most visibly Officer Derek Chauvin, were involved in the murder of 46-year-old George Floyd. Video of his death went viral across social media that sparked nationwide protests that lasted for months. At the height of the protests, the National Guard had been deployed in 31 states. A majority of the states in the United States had National Guard in them. Over 200 cities across 27 states had imposed a curfew by early January, impacting over 60 million people, according to Business Insider. The mass deployment of National Guard constituted the largest military operation in U.S. history for something other than war. Think about that for a second. So how did Donald Trump respond? On Twitter, Trump responded by calling protesters thugs, a racially, well, I'm just going to say racist, not racially loaded. Just as the protests were beginning, he said that. For the second time in a week, Twitter attached a warning label to his tweet in which the president seemed to condone violence. Trump would continue vaguely inciting violence the next day as well. Then on June the 1st, declaring himself, quote, "your president of law and order," end quote, Trump threatened to summon all available federal resources, civilian and military, to quell protesters who demanded justice after the killing of George Floyd. He referred to demonstrators as a, quote, "angry mob." This was before he emerged from a bunker beneath the White House out of fear of what local protesters were doing the night before. He'd posed with an upside down Bible. A lot of people might remember this, the same day as the order was given to attack nearby protesters with rubber bullets and tear gas. While the threat to deploy the military was largely bluster for several reasons, least of which being that as I said, the National Guard was already deployed across the country in what already looked more like a military occupation than a proper federal response to public outcry. This is obviously an evil act that showed the level of extreme disdain many people in power have for us. Videos were going viral daily showing assault by officers in states across the country. We were dealing with a man who, if he had his way, would have incited a level of unrest in the country unlike anything any of us have ever lived through. So the third most evil thing Trump did as president was implement the zero tolerance policy of family separation. From travel bans to ICE detention centers to claiming Africans and Salvadorans lived in, quote, shithole countries. Pardon my language, but that's what he said. There wasn't an issue that Trump spent more time fanning the flames of intolerance around than the issue of immigration. The zero tolerance policy for separating families was being floated around as a proposal as early as March of 2017, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. The policy itself wasn't announced until May 7th of 2018, when the Department of Justice announced that it implemented a zero tolerance policy dictating that all migrants who cross the border without permission, including those seeking asylum, be referred to the Department of Justice for prosecution. Undocumented asylum seekers were imprisoned, and any accompanying children under the age of 18 were handed over to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, which shipped them miles away from their parents and scattered them across 100 different Office of Refugee Resettlement Shelters and other, care arrangement centers across the country. Hundreds of these children, including infants and toddlers, were under the age of 5. Prior to the Trump administration, families were generally paroled into the country to await their immigration cases or detained together. So that's how it was handled before Trump. But as late as October of 2020, NBC reports that lawyers say that they can't find the parents of 545 migrant children because their parents were deported before a federal judge ordered that they be found. Also, according to the ACLU and other outlets, a whistleblower blew the whistle on 4 sterilizations happening within ICE detention centers or within a ICE detention center. Might have been more, but I'm not sure about that, in Irwin County, Georgia. This entire issue of immigration during the Trump years requires much deeper analysis than I will provide in this video, but what was done to migrants across the border is definitely one of the most evil things done in recent times by any administration on U.S. soil. This is also an ongoing issue as of the recording of this video. So the evilness of Trump's zero tolerance policy, for the lack of a better word, doesn't really need to be explained, I don't think. The second most evil thing Trump did as president was attempting to implement a coup d'etat in the United States. So in the immediate days after the 2020 election, starting on November the 5th, Donald Trump began sowing the seeds of doubts about the presidential election by claiming the outcome was rigged. While ballots were still being counted in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and elsewhere, Trump took to Twitter and demanded that these states stop counting the ballots. All throughout the month of November and well into December, he made false claim after false claim about voter fraud and mail-in ballots. He would enlist the aid of people like Rudy Giuliani and the Kraken herself, Sidney Powell, to form a crack legal team. Trump and his associates would continue nonstop to attack the democratic process. They did it and continue to do it to this day to spread these lies, and it works on his base. Okay. Polls have shown that a majority of Republicans think that there was quote, widespread fraud in the 2020 election without a shred of evidence. I put this at number 2 because of the gravity of the implications of what Trump tried and failed to do. Many people have talked about voter suppression for years now, but in 2020, it became clear that suppression isn't enough. They actually made an attempt to do a coup d'etat in America, and to be fair, it was really some Republicans in key positions within the bureaucracy that prevented it from happening. I'm talking about people that even got death threats in some cases. I'm talking about, even some of Trump's appointed judges. If people think this will end with Trump, think again. Mother Jones and the New York Times both have articles detailing how Republicans are going to attempt to suppress the vote even further in the future. So yes, attempting to destroy American democracy and getting millions to believe anti-democratic lies is definitely one of the worst things Trump has done. This is one of those evils of Trump that is uniquely Trumpian, that can't be blamed on any other president. No one has come remotely close to doing what Trump tried to do, not even Nixon. The number 1 most evil thing Trump did as president, some might already know where I'm going with this, was bungling America's response to COVID-19, leading to over 340,000 deaths, with over 1.8 million Americans infected. So patient zero, for people who don't know what that is, that's the first person to be recorded, at least, as having coming down with a virus, right, that spreads. Patient zero was a man living in the Wuhan province of China in December of 2019. Donald Trump would be first briefed about COVID-19 on January the 18th, 2020, and gave his first public statement about it 4 days later on the 22nd, when he'd say falsely that, quote, "We have it totally under control," end quote, according to Axios. For months past, February and well into March, Donald Trump downplayed the threat of COVID-19 and ignored multiple warnings from officials within his own administration, including Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar, who first warned Trump, and Trump's economic advisor Peter Navarro, who warned of high casualties as well. But Trump ignored them and called them alarmist. He called them alarmists. He said they were being extreme. It would later be revealed through Bob Woodward that Trump was recorded on tape saying that his downplaying of COVID was deliberate. So this wasn't a man who just got it wrong from ignorance. This is a man who knew it was bad, got the warnings, and still did absolutely nothing. That should enrage you. That should, well, anyway, so as Trump and Republicans always do when they screw up, they shift blame. So on March the 18th, months later, he began referring to COVID as a, quote, China virus or Chinese virus, end quote. So notice how routinely he just lays on the xenophobia when he needs to. When he's in trouble, when he's backed into the corner, he goes xenophobic immediately. And it worked. The politicization of COVID and the politicization of wearing masks contributed to the number of deaths we have today. No doubt about it whatsoever. Understand, too, that the downplaying of COVID-19 also played a role in legitimizing opening things back up. So instead of doing what would have been smarter, such as providing a UBI, a universal basic income, and shutting down until we were in the clear, among other things, like other rational countries did, we didn't do that. They passed the CARES Act and provided a one-time $1,200 stimulus and left us on our own. And that's where we are at currently as of the making of this video. The handling of COVID-19 has been nothing short of treacherous and borderline genocidal. Get this. If COVID were more infectious and more deadly, this virus could have ended us as a country. Why do I say that? I don't think people realize how close we've come to collapse. Right. And I can say that because I can look exactly at the response from a lot of Americans. We dodged the bullet that COVID-19 wasn't worse than it actually turned out to be, because if it was, a lot more people would have passed from it. Now, there are several vaccines, but there's no clear plan to roll out the vaccines. According to the Huffington Post, we are way behind schedule regarding getting the vaccine where it needs to be. It will still be months. Okay. It'll still be months before the majority of people will have access to any of the vaccines. So I could go on and on about COVID, but it should be clear why I put it at number one. So that's my list. My name is Brian Lewis. Tell me in the comments section what I missed that you would have included had you made a top 10 video, because I couldn't include everything, of course. And this is going to be my last video for 2020. I'm definitely looking forward to 2021. Big things are on the horizon, and I hope that you are there to enjoy those moments with us in the future. But make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.